Okay. So today I wanted to talk about depression because it is one of the mental illnesses or mental conditions I don't know anything about. I am lucky. I have never suffered from depression. I don't know that anybody in my family has suffered from depression. Anxiety, sure. Unhappiness, I think it's pretty normal.
Right.
But I wanted to have Amy here because you are a professional, and Oksana was kind enough to come and talk because she has been diagnosed with depression and is medicated. But what I find really fascinating is Oksana is the 5th person I asked to do this, and the 4 before her said no. And I think that is really interesting because knowledge is power, and I think people hide their feelings a lot, especially with depression. It seems to me to be very shameful as opposed to just saying, unfortunately, this is how my chemical makeup works. So I just was so blown away. I've never had a no ever for someone to come on this podcast, ever. And some of the people I asked have been on it before. So it wasn't like, hey, I don't want to do your podcast because I'm scared of the microphone.
Right.
It was, they were like, I'm not comfortable talking about that openly. And I just was really shocked.
Yeah.
So thank you, Oksana, for being brave enough. I didn't know that people that had depression felt that way about their depression.
I think that's one of the more important topics that I feel passionate about, is that there is a really big social stigma around it being a personality default. And that there's a lot of shame even around just like having negative feelings, that you're about, it's like feelings in general are not, I feel like are not
acceptable.
Exactly. And or just, we're not, after a certain age, I feel like early childhood we work on emotional education, but after a certain age it's like emotions are kind of but this, I guess, is something different for me. It's like it's to learn not just my environmental, but it is an internal makeup, know, it's biological. And there's been quite a process for me in having to be able to accept myself, and then also recognize how that works within my environment, and that it's not just my biological makeup, but there's also things within my environment that kind of...
Things like what? Like people, or like your job, or like what?
Experiences, I think.
Experiences.
I think what I've learned, and just the dialogue I've had with some people through social media on the topic, because I do feel strongly that there should be more dialogue, meaningful dialogue on it because of the social stigma on it, is that what sets off your depression is personal. For me, I was moving away from my support system.
Right. You moved to San Francisco.
Yes, I moved to San Francisco, and I was in a relation with my boyfriend at the time, and that relationship was kind of falling apart, and I really didn't have any kind of stability out there. And I suffered a head injury, which everything kind of just spiraled out of control for me. And I didn't know how to seek help. Or, it was like I didn't have the coping tools as an adult to navigate through what I was feeling, or that not being able to get up to take a shower was a biological process happening inside my brain. I would shame myself for it,
Right.
And it would add to, I don't know if I'm kind of...
No, you're fine.
Yeah.
No, you're doing fine.
But yeah, and so going back to the, what sets off your depression is personal. And some people, when you're in that space, it is really hard to reach out and ask for help, or it is really hard to even talk about it.
But why is it hard?
I know from myself, it's, I feel very drained and just physically weighted. And I'm kind of stuck in this cyclical conversation internally of self-doubt and kind of I want to call it like self-emotional abuse, in a sense. Like I'm not good enough. I'm not, and I'm internally having this dialogue that I'm fighting all day, that I don't have the energy to.
I see.
Or the capacity to kind of like have to open up to talk to, because it's draining,
right?
And I'm already drained,
right?
So, you know.
Well, and also the people that you would think to seek help from,
are
shiny and happy,
right? Exactly.
And then you approach them, and they either don't understand how you feel,
right,
or you perceive that they wouldn't,
right,
or the advice they have to give you from somebody who hasn't been in that perspective is completely useless.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, and that's another thing that I found, like through my own, I guess, research and through therapy, is like, you know, the advice sometimes can be like unintentionally hurtful that you do get, and it's
really
pull yourself up by your bootstraps, just snap out of it. Why can't you get out of it? I mean, it becomes accusatory at times, like why can't you get out of bed, or just take a shower,
exactly,
or you know, not going to work. It's not an excuse to not, depression's not an excuse to not go to work or not go to class, or you know,
why don't you just think differently?
Right.
It's like,
what's wrong with you?
That?
What's wrong with
right.
it? Right.
If it were that easy, that'd be awesome.
Right.
Well, I have to say, from a non-depressed person, I had biases. I think I probably still have biases I don't even know are in my brain about depression, because I'm very much a snap out of it. You don't have the luxury to lay in the bed all day. So how dare you think that's okay? You know, and not understanding. I mean, I think I'm a pretty empathetic person.
Yeah,
and if someone came to me and went, no, I actually have chemical depression, I would understand that I don't understand what that means for them, and would never say anything hurtful. But I know in the past, before I was a 47-year-old, a little more enlightened person, I definitely was like, must be nice to just lay in the bed all day.
Right.
There's no way I could lay in the bed all day. But part of me wonders if part that's still probably a bit biased, wonders, why can't that be your answer? Why can't it? Is it really just a massive chemical problem?
They don't have that internal desire to snap out of it. It's literally like you've been in the ocean. Mm-hmm. Try running when you're waist deep in the water.
Right. It's impossible.
It's impossible to do it at regular speed.
Right.
Yeah.
So everything feels like that. Getting a cup of coffee at Starbucks is like, I can't get out of bed.
It's true.
And you're like, but you want the coffee.
Right. That's right.
But you just can't get out. The amount of energy it would take to tend to your ADLs, your activities of daily living. You're getting up and putting makeup on if you choose to wear makeup, to groom yourself, to look presentable, literally is impossible, because they feel like they don't deserve to look presentable. They don't deserve to get out.
God.
No, it is the biggest blanket, like a lead. I had a client explain it to me once, which I thought was such a phenomenal visual and physical description. Was, she goes, have you ever been to an x-ray where they had to put a lead blanket over your whole body, you know, for your dental stuff, you know, and it goes up to your neck? That's what it feels like all the time.
It's true.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's true. It's definitely, and it takes a lot of energy to muster to, and it's an internal and it causes more internal conflict for me, because it's like I want to be able to get up and take that shower, and I really want, you know, to go out and see my friends that I love so dearly, and I'm sure it would actually help me if I could, but I also feel stuck, you know, and that the energy it would take to do that, I just can't muster it, and then I get mad at myself.
Right.
And so then I become even more stuck.
And then you're trying to find an outfit to wear, and you're just sitting there ruminating about how now if I get out of the house, to physically be with these people who don't suffer from depression is still yet even more draining. So to just coexist once you get out, it's almost like they keep saying to themselves, where's the reward? What am I going to get out of going to get my coffee? If this feels so heavy right now, I might as well just, you know, delay all of that and just.
But what's the reward in staying in bed?
Not having to confront, not having to put on an air, not having to put forth so much effort to get ready, to be around happy people who don't understand them,
right?
To just deal with other people, to engage with people,
to pretend.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So, are there different types of depression?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's different severities of depression. There's different causalities of depression. There's different etiology. There's, you know, you were talking about it being, you know, a personal You know, everybody is affected in a different way. And I was thinking, just hearing your story, it wasn't just that you didn't have a support system. It was a trauma from the loss of a relationship, coupled with not having a support system, coupled with a head injury, there's medical onset of depression.
Right.
You can, I mean, let's look at Robin Williams. I mean, from all intents and purposes, I think we know that he committed suicide because of a medical diagnosis he was given.
Right.
You know, there's medical illnesses that can cause depression. There's medical illnesses that can cause a desire for an end of life because they know the progression it's going to take. You know, there's so many different reasons for it. And then there's just good old chemical imbalance that nobody asked for.
Right.
You know, where you're literally born with an insufficient amount of serotonin.
Right.
You know?
And serotonin is created naturally by exercise.
Correct.
Right?
Well, it's created naturally in your body anyway, but it's increased.
Right.
Dopamine, serotonin, all those.
Cortisol too. I feel like cortisol as well. Like,
Cortisol, yeah.
I feel like I'm always like, because I'm also diagnosed with acute generalized and social anxiety, that I'm always in fight or flight mode, which like releases that extra cortisol, which also then kind of spirals into my depression as well.
Right.
You know, so.
And I'm sure if you don't have enough sleep, you know that isn't restorative. Which, you know, so if you have anxiety and you have depression, usually up late, right, watching TV or trying to self-soothe because you don't have self-soothing skills, which causes you to not sleep enough, which causes you to have high cortisol levels, which
so cyclical. All of it sounds so cyclical. Like, how do you break? You know,
negative feedback cycle.
What is it?
It's a negative feedback cycle. You don't take care of yourself, so you feel like crap. So you go to, you know, you don't sleep on time. You wake up, and then you don't feel good enough to take care of yourself, so you don't take care of yourself, and you feel, you know, it
sounds exhausting. I'm exhausted.
It is exhausting.
And I can't imagine having depression. I don't want it.
And then have somebody tell you to snap out of it.
Right.
You know,
or that like you're a Debbie Downer.
Right.
Debbie Downer. And that I don't want to be around you because your energy is just so down and it's affecting me.
By the way, if you have friends that say that to you, you can promptly tell them to fuck off.
Well, the funny thing is, I've known Oksana for 11 years now. Not someone, A, I ever would have thought was depressed.
Right.
B, that I ever thought would be a Debbie Downer. She's always happy. I always thought, my impression of you has always been, she's like a hippie, but today.
Right.
Just super relaxed. And we're going to play in the mud today, and we're going to do a pit finger. Because Oksana was George's preschool teacher. And then, I don't know if you had Isla ever.
No, but I was at the Sunshine Shack with.
Yeah, you were at the same preschool while they were there. So, every time I would drop off, she'd be like, today we're going to climb the rock wall. Isla was swinging on the swing, but she forgot her panties today, so no big deal. You know, just so happy and happy to be there. And I would never have thought that. But that's such a key. I think a lot of people after the two recent suicides of Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain, I had several people email me saying, please talk about depression.
Right.
Because I felt like there's such a spectrum in depression, not to overuse that term spectrum, and people kept saying, how do you help people when they're in that place? Because a lot of people do want to be helpful, but have biases and don't understand that you can't say, just take a shower.
Right.
You'll feel so much better.
Well, first of all, from those two, before I even go into those two different, those were two very different suicides, but your comment earlier about having biases and not, you know, understanding how you could possibly come off as not being caring because of that kind of like, we'll snap out of it. There is a difference between someone who's saying you need to snap out of it and take a shower, which is castigating. I mean, it's not kind, it's not helpful. If you were one of her friends and you were at her age level and she was experiencing the symptoms in San Francisco and you came over and you were like, snap out of it, we're gonna get you in the shower. That it's totally, and that's more of a place where you come from.
Right.
So before you explain yourself like that, because it's very different for someone to stand outside and go, I don't understand what your problem is, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, which is not who you are. You're more of the like, come on, let's go. Let's get
I can help you. I can help you.
That's a joining energy of like, you might not understand it, but I'm gonna help pull you over to my level.
But is that helpful for someone who's in that place?
It can be very helpful.
It can be.
I'll tell you, honestly, coming back home, you are definitely part of that support system that I came back to. Like, you know, I think what keeps me going is knowing that there are people who love me very deeply, care about me very deeply, and I want to be the best person I can be for them, which can also be conflicting. It can also make it difficult because I know I can be that person that sees me as a positive hippie, modern day hippie, but when I am in my darkest times, it's hard because I have these memories of who I was, but then it's interesting being around the people who was when I was in those happier times kind of helps me reframe, like reliving these memories, which kind of I feel like in my brain almost reopens up like new thinking patterns. Because through therapy been learning is that we're kind of creatures of habit, and the similar thing that happens in our brain that will go down the similar like thinking patterns. And so what triggers my depression could be but also being around people where I have fonder memories with helps trigger happy feeling, more positive,
I see. Okay.
But it's also, it's also hard in that, like, sometimes I feel like I have to pretend because people remember me as a certain way.
Right.
And that, like, when I'm in this place, so that's why sometimes it's easier for me to just be reclusive because I don't have to pretend that I'm not that
everything's okay,
right? And then I'm because when I'm good, I am good. I'm great.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I
tell me this, because I have found with a lot of people that if they're put in the position of having to pretend at times, sometimes if they act as if in that situation, they can at the end of the day find themselves out of the funk for that period of time. Has that happened to you?
It's true. It's definitely true. Yeah. And then
fake it till you make it.
It is fake it till you make it. It's kind of like, okay, I'm here. I have to snap out of it. And, and then getting out of their head that day, they can kind of, it's a huge part of AA. It's interesting with addiction that they do the same thing. It's like you help a newcomer because if you're steeped in your own stuff, to get out of it can be very helpful to somebody else, and then you're not ruminating, because it's that self-loathing cycle that can happen in the head, and if it's interrupted, you can actually get out of yourself and enjoy yourself. So sometimes it's that acting as if, or that snap out of it, let's get you in the shower, let's get you you said you'd be at the bar by 9, we're not going to let you go on this, and having that responsibility can sometimes pull you out. Depends on the severity of the depression.
It's absolutely true though. No, I think that like my I'm so fortunate enough to be in the line of work that I do is working with children, because it's like, that is like a little slice of heaven for me that for the day that I get to experience raw vulnerability and pure happiness
and lack of judgment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's so natural.
Yes. Yes. And it, and that sometimes and I go back home and then I get on my social media and I see all the depressing things happening.
Right.
I have to remember. And I think like just yesterday, a person I used to work with made a comment about how, she's never seen a person light up kids' faces quite the way that I have, and it made me cry and remember like, oh my God, like these interactions that I do have with children is such a blessing. It is, I'm not this like miserable pit of, and I do have
despair.
And I do have an important influence in life. And,
absolutely.
And
you've made a lot of kids feel really special, especially kids who are quirky, and that's amazing. I have a very quirky kid.
That's my favorite.
And she's always been so safe with you, and that's
quirky,
a gift that you have to give to the world. Shrinking to hide yourself from the world doesn't serve the world or yourself.
Right.
It doesn't. So that's the piece I get hung up on too, is I go, if you're depressed, these 4 people I asked before, why can't you share that with the world?
Right.
Because the world needs
stigma.
to hear it. But I don't like that answer.
I know. Let me tell you,
I don't want that answer.
It is in a world where people are so obsessed with social media and they're so concerned with trying to look perfect all the time. They're
bullshit.
Just unwilling to be vulnerable. Like, believe me, there's so many stories I could tell you, because professionally, unfortunately, and because of motherhood, I can't.
Yes.
Now that my children know that I was doing a podcast with you, I'm sure they'll be searching it up. So I'm like, no, can't go there.
Never mind. Sorry. Take her, Halston. Take that out. Sorry.
But I can tell you, there's so much I would like to share, but from that arena, I can't. I can disclose. I can change names for you, but depression is a vital link to suicide. I mean, it's so important to nip it before it gets to that part.
But how do you nip it?
And the biggest stigma, I think, for people is it's shameful that it's and it's easy to hide, right? Mm-hmm. It's easy to hide. And I think for that reason, people would rather let it stay hidden. Mm-hmm. It's not like a character defect we wear on the, come on, baby. It's not like a character defect we wear on the outside where people can see, you know, that you're faulty in some way or you're missing something. It's internal. So why would they want to expose it?
Right.
What's in it for them?
Right.
Unless
It's
healing somebody.
It's healing. And that's
Right.
why, because really the truth is, I have this thing about responsibility, right? Until you take responsibility for yourself and your flaws entirely, you can't really heal. I don't think until you say, I drink too much.
Right.
And I do that. Or I have depression and I have not been to therapy. I have not been diagnosed. I have not. Then you have to take responsibility for that, because not only is, to me, this is completely my opinion, but that's part of being an adult, right, is saying, I need help. The internet has a wealth of resources to find help. And I love myself enough that I deserve help. And I know that's hard, the love myself enough piece for
right.
people. Sometimes they have to go to therapy to figure out how to love themselves enough.
Or how to talk about it or
something.
Well,
But
it depends on the parental influence. You know, I mean, I know somebody who's been sober for over 20 years and their parents still say, but it was just a phase. You know,
Really?
you were a young guy when you got this. Like, there's no way you can drink now, right? And he's like, I don't understand why they don't understand. Like, why would I want to go back and try that again?
Right.
You know, and
why would I test
just
it out?
looking at him like, they don't understand.
Yeah.
Thank God you have so many people in your life that do understand. They don't get it.
Right.
And and the truth is, for his parents, because they're very hypercritical, kind of blue blood, you know, it's embarrassing to go to the country club and not drink with their friends.
Right.
So for him, it's very, very embarrassing.
Right.
You know, so depression, if it was just depression, it'd have the same, you know, God, come on, what are you talking about? You're not depressed. First, there's a denial from the parent. You're not depressed, or you don't drink too much, or you don't have mania.
What do you have to be
just
depressed
excited.
about?
Right.
Right.
What do you have to be depressed
and
about?
I think there's this guilt. My parents, they feel like that then they're responsible for
Right.
my, so they don't want, you know.
Right.
But now that makes you feel
We were
worse.
good parents,
right?
What do you do? We were
Yeah,
good
like-
parents to you. What do you have to be? Yeah. There's almost like a disownership and a denial from your primary support group, right? And then if you go to a therapist, God forbid, you know, what do you need? You need a doctor to tell you what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Like, what?
Right.
You're going to go tell somebody else all your secrets? Why are you
Yeah.
going to tell her? What are you going to tell them? What are you going to tell them you can't tell us? You
Isn't
know?
that funny? I experienced that, and so did Bert.
Right.
Yeah. And
That exact thing.
Yeah.
of,
I saw a
why do
neighbor
you
in
say
my
that?
office once. I saw a neighbor in my office once, and she stopped dead in the hallway. She was going to see another therapist in my office, and she was like, "Oh, hi, I didn't think I'd see you here."
Right.
And I said, "I didn't think I'd see you here either." And she said, "Well, this is embarrassing." I said, "Oh God, I hope not, because I do it for a living."
Yeah.
And she started laughing, you know. But I kind of had to help her over the stigma of it. Like, you know, she's like, "Because I'm here seeking help," and I'm like, "Well, I'm hoping people keep doing that so they get better."
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that it actually took me years to be able to finally get myself into therapy, and even like before wanting to get because I also carried the social stigma that there's nothing wrong. Like,
Right.
I don't want to be
Why do I-
convinced that
right.
I'm depressed. I can fix this on my own,
Totally.
type of thing, and then making that appointment and never following through.
Yeah.
And
What was so scary?
you know, it's just, that's also, I think, part of like when I'm in my, it's just following through on plans in general, because again, like with like feeling weighted or, you know, but what also, what you might have to address, you know,
Or this person's going to see the innermost sanctum of me, like, you know,
Right,
they're going
it's
to like
hard to be vulnerable.
messing around. They're going to dissect me. Like, why do I want
Sure.
them to know every single? What if they find something really bad?
Right.
You know?
Right.
And then I'll tell you one thing my therapist would do. She would just sit and stare at me in silence.
Okay.
And it would make me so uncomfortable.
So let's take a moment right there, because not to chastise your therapist.
Go ahead.
But there are different types of therapy. So I want
sure.
everybody to understand this, because I feel like a lot of therapists lack the training or the desire to educate
Sure.
people about that one piece.
Right.
That sounds like a psychoanalytic therapist.
Right. Well, and she did do like a lot of Gestalt theory on me.
Okay,
So,
okay.
but but it was actually a positive experience. Though.
Okay.
And that she, in the beginning, it was a very I felt like I had to fill the silence up.
Yes.
And finally, we built this trust between each other where I just looked at her and she looked at me, and we both just sighed together. We sat in silence for what felt like minutes, but probably was just seconds.
Right.
And we both just, shared. And she said, this is why I do this with you, is to be able to share a moment of silence with somebody who's incredibly vulnerable.
Right.
And there's a lot of trust that it takes to be able to, especially
It's
with
huge to be able to do that with somebody. Yeah, it is.
And to learn, that taught me a lot about vulnerability, I think, and being able to also just address, or being able to trust and to
Right.
talk,
Right.
be comfortable with myself to talk about
Right.
these things.
And just to sit with the silence. It's
Yeah,
very
sometimes-
awkward and it's very challenging. But I think people need to know when they're interviewing for a therapist, and you're allowed to interview, just like you would interview for a pediatrician for your child.
Or a contractor.
You don't just go to one, or a
Yeah.
contractor, or
Oh,
anybody
so
who
true.
you're using to help you. You should really ask the question, what is your style?
Right.
They'll say modality. You could say, what is your style of therapy? There's psychoanalytic, where they will literally open the door to the waiting room and say nothing. And there's supposed to be a tabula rasa, a blank slate, where you come in and you don't, it's whoever breaks first, and it's not going to be them. And it feels like a power struggle. But it's a type of therapy. It's a legitimate type of therapy that I so don't practice. And I don't, and they meet with their patients 4 or 5 times a week. And but there are some people who absolutely need it, thrive on it, 100%. There's cognitive behavioral therapy, where your therapist is really, I want to be very careful and not say life coach, because it's not a life coach. But I think what life coaches kind of try and capitalize on is this basic back and forth of goal setting and directives and completing goals and moving on to new goals, and feeling like they're making a lot of forward progress and momentum, which is very important to some people. Like, I don't want to delve in the past. I just want to feel better. Then there's psychodynamic, which kind of looks in the past, but also has a very present feeling to it as well, that kind of rubs up against Gestalt a little bit. And then there's just short-term focused therapy, where it's very, what's going on today? Let's talk about what's going on today, and using whatever tools are available. There's so many different types of therapy. So I guess my advice would be, ask the person you're interviewing what type of therapy you do. What does it feel like in the room? Is it kind of a conversation between the two of us? Or are you expecting me to come in there and just talk? Because it can be very unsettling for some people to have a psychoanalytic therapist. It's not what they were wanting.
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, if you ever tell a therapist you don't want to come anymore,
Right.
and you'd like transfer to somebody else, and they keep making you feel guilty about it, not okay. Walk away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't I've had people have that experience too, and I'm like, no.
Well, what's interesting to me in saying this, I think there's a lot of stigma to therapy. Just like there was a lot of stigma for podiatrists, right? Podiatrist, he's a crook. He's just taking your money. What does a podiatrist really do? And I think the same conversation would happen with therapists. And like any medical doctor, dentist, contractor, there are kooks.
Right.
100%.
Oh, 100%.
But that doesn't mean every single one of them is a kook.
Sure.
I've been in therapy forever, since I was 24.
That's great.
And I'm 47. And not kooks. Two different therapists. One was in New York, one's here. Not kooks. Invaluable people.
Yeah, I think and it sounds like you've had a positive experience, and I'm sure for me, being, a struggling student in San Francisco, I feel like I was so fortunate to have been able to find the therapist I did. And now moving back here, I've really struggled. I think that there's also, along with social stigma, the accessibility to mental health is really difficult, especially if you've finally gotten into that place where you're wanting to seek help. There's wait lists that are like 5 weeks long,
Right.
for, people who are on Medi-Cal.
Yep.
There is, unfortunately there are some sliding scales, but they can't address all of your needs, or you just can't afford it, or like getting in to see my doctor. I was already on medication in San Francisco, and then having my Medi-Cal switched to Los Angeles was such a process that I was terrified what I was going to do with, when I run out of medication, and trying to get an appointment was like 3 months ahead of time.
Wow.
And they told me, there's All of You Mental Health Center that you can go to. And I went, and they told me that I sat and I talked, and they, asked me a bunch of questions for about 20 minutes. And they told me there was nothing they could do to help me. And so I was feeling very defeated.
Were they seeing if you were supposed to be admitted for inpatient? Yeah, they basically referred her for admitting, like, if you're so depressed and you're going to commit suicide, go to All of You. And they basically said, you're not at that level of depressed, so we can't do anything for you. But they don't do continuing care. They basically only admit for their inpatient. Yeah.
And so I was feeling very defeated, and I guess this is why I feel so passionate or strongly about talking about it out loud, because I think that it's really hard to even come to terms that there's something that that you need help, that you need external, and then trying to get that access and being denied becomes so disheartening and so defeating, and that I wish that there was more dialogue and less social stigma to have meaningful dialogue about it, so that we can mobilize and create a better mental health accessibility for people in our society. Because I think we see it in our homeless population. We see it,
in the addiction population.
Absolutely.
And even with young adults, I think young adults
teenagers too
are getting depressed like they didn't as much when we were kids. What has happened? Why? Is it social media?
I think a lot of it is social media.
I do too.
I mean, there's so many things, I don't know if you heard about the 8th grader that hung himself. It was I want to say it was like 4 months
in
ago.
our neighborhood, like in our community here, local.
It was in Sherman Oaks.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, and he, seemingly had nothing bothering him. Was extremely popular. Signed off on social media before he did it. I don't know the family personally. We know somebody who was the son was very close friends with him, and they may have found more information since then. But there was another child also that died, another boy, a year younger, in a local school in our community. And he actually didn't kill himself, but he didn't wake up. He had a congenital heart defect, and he didn't wake up. And the wave of depression that started around our kids was very hurtful to watch, because a lot of these kids went home that day and said, I know one of them took their life, but this one didn't mean to take his life. And, I said, it's quite possible the first one didn't mean to take his life either. And they were like, what do you mean? And I said, well, you can take a drug. We don't know if this kid had a stigma and was on medication. Like I said, I don't know the situation, but the parents could have put him on a medication for depression that increased the depression.
Yeah, that's true.
Which basically can cause, severe depression can cause psychosis.
Sure.
And it can cause you to think that there's only one out.
Right.
And that's why it's so important. It's so very important to know that, if you have any of the symptoms, you have to tell somebody you trust.
Yeah.
It's true.
Anybody you trust, so that you can at least have somebody keep tabs on you. Because a reality check is one of the great things that helps with suicidality.
And one important point I'd like to make on that is that, medication, for me at least, alone isn't enough.
Right.
And that's why it's in conjunction with talk therapy that I really get the most benefit out of.
And
that
there are
way
some
you
people
also
who do have actually a benefit from medication that is
just by itself. That's amazing.
It is amazing. And I'll tell you how I know this. I know people have been on Wellbutrin.
Yes, I
to
can't
stop
for a little bit.
to stop. Well, back in the day when it was Zyban, to stop smoking.
Right.
And they reported to me that they didn't even know they were depressed. It was literally to stop smoking. And they had dysthymia, what I would call dysthymia, which is a very low grade, ongoing kind of in the background depression. You're not really feeling depressed, but you're just kind of a wet blanket.
Or you're like glass half empty.
Exactly.
See, that was one of my questions.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So that's dysthymia. And you're just kind of like, whatever. There can be ups and there can be downs, but you're generally just not happy all the
Right.
time.
Nothing makes you.
Yeah. A little irritable.
You can
at
get out of
times.
bed. You can function.
You can function.
Got it.
But life's not so great. And so this person took Zyban for anti-smoking, which was a low level of Wellbutrin back in the day. I think it was like 150 milligrams. And they were like, oh my God, the trees are so green. Yeah. And I was like, hi, welcome. Yeah. So I'm like, guess what? You were suffering from depression as well as addiction to smoking.
Right.
So, just that alone was like the increase in mood that I saw just from them taking that medication. I'm like, you're done. Get out.
Sure.
You know where to find me if you need me, but you're done.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And it was a bridge. It was also like, I tell people like medication is like the scaffolding for the bridge that you build, and then you hopefully take the scaffolding away and you don't need it anymore.
And that's an important thing.
Yeah.
I feel like doctors in the past, when I was 16, I was diagnosed actually with panic disorder. Mm-hmm. I used to get really bad panic attacks, especially when going to bed. And at 16, I definitely did not want to be labeled as having any kind of mental, and I didn't take it very seriously. And the medication, I'm losing my train of thought. I'm sorry. Can you remind me what you were saying?
You were talking about panic disorder and how you didn't want to take that medication helping by itself.
So, but then now recently, now that I am taking things seriously, music again is so great. I forgot how much I loved music. It was such a but there was this long process of like things that I truly enjoyed doing.
That you just forgot about?
They just didn't do it for me.
But that's a symptom of depression.
Right.
So not enjoying things that used to be very enjoyable to you, and not participating in hobbies, not engaging in activities that are enjoyable is a sign of depression. So it's a sign of elevated mood or return to normalcy when you actually can enjoy those things again.
It's true. And I think that's also kind of like motivated me to also want to go seek the therapy treatment as well, and that it's like it's a glimmer of hope when you're in that dark space.
And it can also be a trigger.
Yeah,
music can also be a trigger. I know a lot of people who
negative way
in addiction can when they listen, and also in relationships, it's very interesting. I had somebody say that they had a sponsor who told them when they got sober, they were in a relationship and the relationship was awful. And when they broke up, the sponsor said, "Do not listen to any of the same music you used to listen to." Oh, God. She's like, switch to the 50s. And they listened to only 50s music, which was all novel to them. You were talking about, doing things that are new for you. And it creates novelty. It creates new neural pathways in the brain, which stimulates intelligence, which stimulates increased mood. It's, they found it helps with Alzheimer patients. Oh, yeah. So doing new things, taking a different route to work that you're not familiar with. I mean, literally anything. Listening to the new music help them take away the negative associations with the relationship that they had from the old songs, and also gave them something new to think about. And it was really fascinating how it helped them.
That is amazing. Music's very powerful.
Yeah.
When I was, I guess, 21 or 2, I think I was definitely unhappy. I don't think I was chemically depressed. But I remember thinking, if I just drive like 100 miles an hour and then just turn the wheel really fast, it'd be over.
Yep.
I could do that. That'd be cool.
That's an intrusive thought.
Is that what that is?
Yeah, a little zinger that comes in like, oh my God, why am I thinking about killing myself right now? What just happened?
I didn't really want to die, but I was so unhappy that I was like, really quick, just
what could happen
boom,
if,
done. Mm-hmm. And then of course I would go, my luck, I'd just be paralyzed from the neck down. And then I'd live in misery, so I'd be even worse off. So never mind.
You played the tape all the way through.
I did, and it was a bad choice. Yeah. But I had that thought many times because I used to drive from my dad's to my mom's, which was an hour drive. Mm-hmm. And there were long stretches in the country where you could go really fast.
Right.
And so I was like, perfect stretch right here. Here's where it was. Like just bam and be done. But I was on one of those drives having that thought, crying my eyes out because I was really unhappy. And the song from the Eagles, Desperado came on the radio, and I listened to every word of that song. Why don't you come to your senses? You've been out riding fences for so long now, right? You're a hard one. And everything, I was like, this is about me, and at the end of the song, you better let somebody love you.
Right.
And I went, I'm done with this shit. I've got to figure out. That was part of the perfect storm of everything that was happening in my life to say, you need to make some serious changes.
Right.
You need to stop drinking so much. You need to make some choices in your life. You need to let somebody love you. I was in this cycle of 3-month boyfriends. I'd go 3 months, bam, see ya, 3 months, see ya, 3 months,
the laundry
see ya.
boyfriend.
I couldn't do it, but
wash, rinse, repeat.
Exactly. I was like, he's cute. I'll hang out with him for 3 months.
Yeah.
And then I'm moving on because I was so broken that I couldn't let them see really the broken bits.
Vulnerable parts.
Because I had to fix them so that I could love myself completely. But I remember I've always wondered, was I depressed? Because I don't think I was depressed.
So there's situational depression.
Okay.
Which, I can tell you all about. I've had relationships that I've been very blessed with in my life, and losing those people have caused a situational depression where you literally go into a bereavement process and the bereavement doesn't stop. So that is very possible, and it occurs more frequently than people know. So it's literally, I think bereavement is given, it was a 6-week time period for people to really, get over the loss of a loved one. But if that person is more, if you have a stronger connection with them, if you're more empathic of a person, if you're more, if the relationship was really something other than it was supposed to be, like it was an uncle who replaced a father figure, and the loss of the uncle and the father remains, or a mother who was everything to somebody and the father wasn't there. It just depends what that connection was, or a child. You can't quantify,
right?
So when you have a situational depression and it lingers too long, that can go, or a situational depression could be a result of a bereavement that lingers too long.
Right.
Do you feel
postpartum depression's also a situational depression? You wouldn't have had that if you didn't have a baby and the hormones weren't rushing through your body,
Yeah.
So, and that's okay. Now I remember my thought is when I was first put on medication, it was kind of like a forever thing. This is what you need to do forever. And going back to your similar thought, that I finally met a doctor at my school. It was through I was at San Francisco State in college. That it was a short term, we're going to do this to help you through this process,
right?
And which helped me.
It's the scaffolding for the bridge that you're going to walk across.
So with the situational depression, that makes so much more sense,
Yeah.
and that really helped me to want to address my issues. Is that okay? This might not be forever, but and if it is, that's okay too. But it was that first step to help me to kind of want to take that self-care.
And I like to tell people too, when they engage in a relationship with a psychiatrist and they decide to take medication, it does not matter. People are very apprehensive about it, and I tell them 100% the whole time, you are in charge.
Right.
It's my recommendation to you that you seek to talk to somebody, because I think you'll understand the neurochemical process that you need to understand to want to take the medication for yourself, which they can explain. However, you make the appointment, you attend the appointment. They could tell you right then and there, this is what you have, this is what you should take for it, this is what that will do to your body. And you could walk out with that prescription and never turn into a pharmacy.
Right.
So it's empowering somebody to know you are in charge 100% of the time. You can go to the pharmacy, you can get that medication and never put it in your mouth, and it's still okay. But don't go without the education to get there, to then make the decision. And 100% it's all you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I like to have people understand is you literally can go to the finish line and then go, you know what, I'm still not okay with taking the medication. I say, great. But understand if you've tried everything else and you still haven't tried that, then you may be at an impasse at some point. But I'm okay taking it at your pace as long as you're not miserable, because that's not why you're on this planet.
Right.
But empowering them and letting them know nobody can make you do anything.
Right.
Truly, they can't. But don't disallow yourself to not have all the help that's out there for you.
It's true. I think that was very helpful for me, and having that self empowerment.
Right.
That this is
and if it doesn't work, you get off.
Right. And there are certain medications that I've had to kind of change
Yep.
up. You know, I know with me because I was saying, I shared that I had a head injury, kind of also added, you know, and all the environmental situations added into my depression with they prescribed me Wellbutrin, which lowers your threshold for seizures.
Right.
And I actually did end up suffering, but it was finals week. They upped my dosage that week. There's a lot of you know, environmental factors that but I did suffer a grand mal seizure, and then immediately they were like, okay, we need you off this medication. They put me on Lexapro.
Did they have you on anything else, like Topamax or?
No. It was just, you know, finding the right fit. And then they did like CAT scans and the MRIs and the CT scans, and they found a calcified spot on my brain from my concussion. And they were like, oh, you should have never been on this medication.
Right.
So I guess also like that good communication with your doctor,
Yeah.
you know, is really crucial. But then I was on Lexapro, and Lexapro wasn't working. And then I went back to Celexa, and I know like the people, yes, and it's like people like to say, oh, Lexapro is just like Celexa.
No. So here's the other thing. Everybody's affected by medication very differently, and I'm going to say something I want everybody to listen to. Do not go off of your medication without telling your psychiatrist, because, you know, you are, again, in charge. You have full power. You can tell your psychiatrist to F off if you want. Just tell them, I'm going to go off of this medication now. I don't like it anymore, and I'm not going to hear you tell me to take it. Fine. Wait to hear what they say, because Effexor, Lexapro, there's certain medications you can go off of that will cause massive side effects if you go off of them just like that.
What? Like what?
Like head zaps, where you
What's a head zap?
where you turn your head and like it goes whoop. I mean, it's just like a bizarre.
Wait,
It goes through your whole body.
Wait, what?
It's
just feels
basically
like
like you feel like you walk through a wormhole.
Do you like have whiplash or something?
It's not whiplash.
No,
it's like a mental whiplash.
It's like a vibration
whop.
that kind of just zaps.
It feels like you've been electrocuted. Is how that's been explained to me. Yeah. So there are.
Have you had that happen?
Yeah.
So I just want people to know, because they think, you know, I'm not whistling Dixie when I say it. There are some of these medications, they are there to help you. They're there to, you know, make neurochemical changes in your brain, and they will have a negative side effect if you go off too quickly. So, and if people ever doubt what medication does, I know people who have, you know, taken birth control is another example. You'd think it's a nothing pill, but if you take 1 or 2 or 3 because you forgot if you took them or not, have fun with that.
Yeah, right.
Or the day even.
Right. If you just feel like, oh my God, I'm going to die, or if you have an antibiotic with grapefruit, it literally makes the antibiotic or the birth control null and void. I mean,
Or echinacea,
right. Herbs can mess up an antibiotic, so you really do have to talk to your professional about. If you want to stop something, you know, I always support a client who wants to stop a medication, but you must know what the titration schedule is to go off of a medication to not harm yourself.
Titration is a big word.
Yeah, it's how
that
to
means what?
step down. It's how you titrate up and you titrate down
To wean yourself off.
Wean yourself.
Yeah, got it.
Sorry,
Exactly.
that was a clinical. Yeah, to wean yourself.
I've never heard the word titrate.
Sorry,
I would think that would have to do with something
it's a
entirely
medical term.
different.
So basically weaning yourself on or off.
Got it.
Don't do it by yourself. If you, like I said, you're totally in control. You can tell your psychiatrist, screw you, I'm not taking this anymore. That's fine. But let them tell you how to get off of it appropriately.
And I think that's why, and even if it's your practitioner,
Primary care.
Primary care physician.
The communication's so important, and I think that was a valuable lesson.
And if you don't want to talk, and if you don't want to talk to the doctor, leave a message and don't answer the phone when they call you back. They'll tell you on your voicemail. You want to ask the nurse practitioner. If you're embarrassed to talk to the doctor, you have a relationship where you feel like they're kind of, you know, some of these doctors can be very intimidating, and they step in as a parental role. Like, why don't you want to take the medication? If you don't want to talk to them, say, look, I'm not going to take this medication. Please leave me a message on my machine on how to get off of it.
Right.
And they'll call you. They have a duty to not harm, and they will call you back and tell you how to not do it. And
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a few questions actually. One of Bert's closest friends from growing up killed himself. And this has been how long ago? Probably 4 years ago. And it was completely out of the blue. Had no idea. And I went to my therapist because we were really upset about it. He was a groomsman in our wedding. He's been a friend of Bert's since literally childhood, like played baseball together as kids. And I said, Bert is really struggling because he keeps saying, he called me like 2 weeks before that and said, I really need to talk to you. And I was so busy. It was in one of those times where he was like shooting a special or something where he literally had not 1 minute.
Right.
And he didn't call him back. He actually, we go back east, every year and go see my dad in Alabama and his parents in Florida, which is where his friend was living at the time. And Bert had actually bought a skateboard to go back and skateboard with that friend and was super excited, had the skateboard with us on the trip. When we were in Alabama, his dad called and said, I shouldn't say his name, sorry, that his friend had hung himself in a hotel. And that the parents couldn't even figure it out, that he had been on a date with a girl that night, had seemed to have a really great time. They lived in Tampa, but he had driven to Orlando to have this meeting. He was a model and he had met some modeling agency in Orlando. He had lived in LA for a while and modeled and acted and stuff, and for whatever reason moved back to Tampa. And we were just so shocked. And I had said to my therapist, what could we have done? I mean, what could we, because just how you feel, the people left behind by suicide, you feel like I didn't do enough.
Right.
Or what could I have done? Or why didn't he call? Or whereas Bert said he did call me. He called me 2 weeks before. It's my fault I didn't return his phone call. If I had just returned his phone call, this wouldn't have happened. But she had said to me, if someone has their mind made up, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can tell you one of the weirdest signs to look for that people don't often think about is somebody being in a good mood and giving things away. Because it really tricks you. And it's, Leanne, I'd love to talk to you. I've been going through some stuff. I'm just purging my closet and I found this, heirloom. I'd love you to have it. I'm not going to give it to the girls. I mean, and you'd be like, oh, okay. Well, I mean, I don't want to take it if it's special for you, but like, yeah, but that's so nice. I'll be right. So you don't really think about it. But when people are thinking about suicide and planning it, one of the things they do is they want to assign things that are of great value to them to other people before they go. And you don't really see it coming, and that, by the way, that phone call to Bert could have ended up with a conversation where Bert was like, yeah, things are great, I'm shooting this special, and it could have landed all wrong, where he didn't want to say anything about how he was feeling, but yet another guy who's having success that he doesn't feel he's having success, it could have hastened it. I mean, that phone call may not have done any good, so truly it's hard to not blame yourself too, because when you've lost somebody who you're so close with and you just wish you could have had the conversation that would have turned it around.
That they valued themselves as much as you valued them.
Yeah.
I think that's the hard part, is that Bert I was friends with him, but clearly I just met him when I met Bert.
Right.
And his friendship was with Bert.
Right.
I mean, he was always good to me, but Bert, I think, couldn't understand why he didn't value himself as much as Bert valued him.
Yeah.
Right. Because Bert would go like, he's the most unique thinker. He's really creative. He's one of the guys before Bert and I, got married and had kids. He was always single. And I kind of broke up the band, I think.
Right.
Because they were like the two. I was Yoko, totally. Yeah. They were always hiking, always skateboarding, always smoking weed, always, that was his little go-to guy. And then he didn't want to be a third wheel, which I totally get.
Right.
But Bert was like, I don't understand why he can't see all the things I saw that was amazing about who he was as a person. He was an amazing painter.
Yeah. Well, that's where you look at Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah.
I mean, look at how much joy he brought people watching him on TV. And he struggled with addiction. That's what I was saying. Those two stories from what we know of are very different between Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain, is that he had a history with opioid addiction.
Yes.
And and I know watching his show, he was drinking, and usually the theory is total abstinence is abstinence, and drinking when you have an opioid addiction, not really so much with the abstinence. And so it's a very slippery slope. So who knows if he had a relapse. Robin Williams was heard to have gone into psychiatric treatment to maintain his sobriety after he,
but isn't
had a
it,
fall.
would you agree, or just, I guess, the connection between mental health and the lack of coping tools and addiction, and how that the self-medicating kind of plays
100%.
And going back to the social stigma of not wanting to go on medication or seeking the help, and so doing the things that are socially acceptable, like drinking.
Yeah.
So they go hand in hand, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
They're kind of bed partners.
Right. Unless you've had an open sobriety, like a Robin Williams has had, or Anthony.
What is an
Bourdain
open sobriety?
In other words, you've told the world that you're sober. People know that you've been in sobriety. So then there's great shame in returning to the social conventional drinking. You can't do that either. I don't know if he ever did return to it, but I do know he was hospitalized before. And I also know he also was the one diagnosed with the life-threatening illness that he wasn't willing to deal with the consequences of.
Right.
Kate Spade, I don't know. I haven't delved into what happened with her. I just know that
clearly she was depressed.
And it was a very unusual way. Females don't typically have a violent ending like that. They usually do pills.
How did she kill herself? Did she hung
herself? Yeah. So there's, they also have usually a more maternal kind of like not wanting anybody to find them in a position that would be shocking and traumatic. They usually want to go in a way where it doesn't cause, most women, believe it or not, clean their apartments. They don't want to leave a muss for anybody. They're very, they think external of themselves. They don't think well of themselves, but they think well of others, and they try to kind of clean everything up before they go. And
and I think I can relate to that, and also kind of touching back on what you were saying with how Bert wished his friend valued himself there's that guilt.
That's typical.
That, people want it, I'm just, it's so hard. Like, life should not be this hard. And I've had this thought, that I'm wasting this life because I'm so stuck in my head and self-berating myself that it's like almost not worth living anymore. But I feel too guilty to actually take my life and leave, the people who, that,
who value you,
so there is that I not being able to, or just, I guess people who are able to cross that line, I can see why they would want to clean their house or, make it as painless as possible for everybody around them. But fortunately for me, a lot of my depression stems from guilt and shame that I wouldn't be able to do that to the
It
people
keeps
around
you.
me.
It keeps you as a tether.
Yes,
so that you don't do
exactly.
something like that. By the way, I'm so sorry to do this, but every time I look down at my phone, I feel like I'm being so rude. But because of what I do, I can't not look to make sure it's fine. Sorry.
No problem.
Okay.
Let me see what else I wrote down for my questions. So if regular people just listening to this podcast, what are the keys? How do you recognize depression in a friend? As
depression or suicidality?
Let's do both.
Okay.
Because I know depression can be like what you were talking about, where everything's glass half empty.
Okay. Sorry. Oh my God.
What do you need to take a break and make a phone call?
No, I'm just going to write a text very quickly.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry.
That's okay.
So I think with suicidality, it's much easier to recognize.
Really?
There is, if you follow, the clinician way of doing it is you look for suicidality, which is depression is part of it, but it's a feeling of hopelessness. You're looking for passive or active suicidality. So passive suicidality would be like, oh, I can't do this anymore. I just feel so hopeless. I feel so drained. I feel like I can't, what's the point? It's that Sisyphean effort of like, I roll the rock up the hill and it keeps rolling back down, and I roll it up and I make the bed every day, and I do the lunches and I cook the dinner, and then the same shit, different day tomorrow. And that is like a passive suicidality. And active suicidality is hearing somebody say, I just want to die. I want to die. I want to kill myself. Well, I want to die is actually technically considered passive, but I take it more of active. I want to kill myself. I just want to jump off a bridge, basically stating that they want to be gone. If they have that and it's coupled with a plan, how would you do that?
Right.
And then they state the plan, and then it's, do they have access to the means to carry that plan out?
Right.
So that's to assess suicidality. Depression, very difficult.
Right.
They can put on a happy face. It depends how close you are with them. But it's loss of interest in activities, like, oh, you don't listen to music anymore. Or, oh, you stopped skating. Or, oh, you stopped why did you stop taking pictures? Or noticing that people have disconnected from the things that used to bring them joy. Because it can be a very slow, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it's absolutely true. And not wanting to go out and see, or not picking up your phone. Like even like
isolation is massive.
Yeah,
that's
isolation.
A big one.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you see somebody, and it's really hard to be in a big friend group and see one person kind of slowly become the lost child and isolate a little bit, because it can be so covered. Depends on age too. If you're young and you're in school and it's like, oh, I've just got a lot going. I've got finals. I've got, you can mask it so well.
It's so true.
Right?
That's
it's
so
like
true.
if you at least show up for like, a colleague's birthday party or like
wedding.
Right. Or wedding.
You
Right.
made your-
You made your appearance. You could slip out before you have to deal with anybody. Well, she was there,
Yeah.
you have to really pay attention to your friends
It's very
and know that
true.
they're hurting. And, there's always going to be a narcissist in the group who's going to blah, 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 blah about their, the worst day they had because they had to return a dress that didn't fit,
Yeah.
And, those people can take up a lot of space in the room. You got to look if you want to be a good friend, look at all your friends and see what's going on. Has anybody kind of slid under the radar?
Right.
And reach out and sometimes it's just a call and saying like, is everything okay? I feel like you've been so quiet.
It's true. I think my friends have gotten really good at doing that with me, because now I am open about that this is my diagnosis and this is something that I do have friends that from time to time check in, and they're very patient with me. Like they call and I won't answer their phone calls, or they text and I won't text them back, but they don't take it personal.
Right.
They know that it's like I'm kind of going through something, and it's gonna make me cry thinking about it because they're very patient
It's
with me.
special to have a support group
Yeah,
like that.
and I'm very grateful for that, and they know that I am, even if I'm not able to vocalize it at that moment, or
But with educating them about what you go through,
sharing it with them
allows them to adjust how they interact with you.
It's true.
They'll know, they'll have less expectations on you to get back to them right away,
or take it personal.
Right, or to take it personal. It becomes less about them and it's more like, oh, she's going through something, and then I like to tell people, if you want to support somebody who's having depression, if you're really upset and you're really freaked out about how they're doing, you have permission to go, you know what? You don't have to respond to me except with a dash or a period. But I'm a little freaked out that I haven't heard from you. Can you please give me something?
My friends do that.
And then you give them an emoticon or like a thumbs up or whatever, and then they're like, okay, cool. Like at least I know there's still tension on the line.
It's true.
Right. That's a good thing to say, because I would think I get frustrated when I don't hear back from people when something's going on in their life.
Right.
If someone's mom is ill and I know that's really bothering my friend, and I text and I don't hear back, then I get even more worried. And then my whole day is spent worrying about that friend.
Right.
Where 2 seconds of them going, I'm working on it.
Right.
Right.
I can't talk now.
Right.
I thanks for thinking of me. We'll talk next week. And then I'm like, okay, cool. Then I know that she's okay. And then it's like you said, it's that like tight line. So you know that you're still connected, because friendship is important. I don't know how people live without real friendships, like those real true personal connections, because especially people who have depression, I would imagine your lifeline is having friends, because friends are the family you choose.
Right.
You're born with these friggin' jerks that you're born with.
Family. They're your
jerks,
family.
Jerks or no jerks. I have the best dad ever, but sometimes they go, you don't know what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not talking to you about race, religion, sex, age, or national origin. But other than that, no. But your friends are the family you choose,
It's your
right?
support system. Yeah, no, and I think that I learned by not having them, like how important that was.
Because you
know?
moved.
Yeah, it was.
That was really hard for you, wasn't it?
God, and so it was interesting that I kind of had a dialogue on Facebook the other day with people about like the supports, like hotline, people using it to post, and there's like two groups of people that at least I felt like I most identified with the group of people who felt like dropping this hotline was a little bit superficial. That like I'd rather have that friend check in, and then other people feel like, well, some people don't have that support system,
Right?
And sometimes it's so hard to talk about it, which I do get. Like sometimes it's just even it can be even harder to talk to your loved ones about it. That talking to somebody that they don't know or just texting that hotline can be so vital for somebody. And I think that enlightened me a little bit more to see that there's what depression is a lot more a personal kind of experience, but that the value for me, at least, to be open with my friends and family about what's going on so that they can support me in the way that...
And support comes in a lot of different ways, right?
That's true.
There's
yeah.
a lot of different ways you can skin that cat.
That's
But Amy, because you're brilliant, got the National Suicide Hotline number, which is 800-273-8255. And Oksana gave me the crisis text line text number. You can text... What's that say? Text home to 741-741 in the United States. But I listened to this podcast the other day that was so cool about a crisis hotline in the UK. And the woman, I think it was a TED Talk, the woman was talking about herself. And she was living at home, being sexually abused by her father. She would run away, get found, be brought back, run away, get found, be brought back. And she called this crisis hotline. And they played her phone call. And she was like, she just talked. She didn't even ask for help.
Right.
She just said, I'm scared. These things are happening to me. I feel terrible. I'm on the street. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know where I'm going to go. And the woman just listened. She didn't offer any advice even. She just listened. And the woman talking was in her 40s or 50s. And that phone call was made when she was like 16.
Wow.
And they still had that recording of that phone call. So when she grew up, she started working for that crisis hotline as a volunteer.
I love that.
And then she created another hotline for the elderly, because she said she found that depression is so prevalent in the geriatric community, and the one thing they're lacking is a social connection. So she has a crisis line for geriatrics only, and she played a few recordings, and it literally was like this lady going, I've been watching The Price is Right, and I don't know why he keeps doing this one thing on this one game. That's all it was.
Funny.
And I was like, it's amazing how that simple moment can change someone's life forever, of just calling a crisis hotline and just talking about what's going on.
Well, I was thinking about the guy when we were doing the bridging for Girl Scouts. There's national suicide prevention hotlines on the bridge, and I was thinking there was a guy who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge in 2000 and he survived.
He did?
1% of people who jump off that bridge survive, and he was one of the ones that made it.
Was he injured? He had to be.
Sure he was, but he didn't talk about that. I remember reading the article. He was young. He was I want to say he could have still been a teenager when he did it. He's, I think, in his 20s, and maybe now he's in his 30s. He jumped off and said, as his hands slipped away from the railing, the first second he thought was, I don't want to do this.
No way.
And he made it. And he had bipolar depression, and he has now ever since been a crisis counselor, going around educating people that no matter how bad you think it is, I swear to God, that moment of truth, right when you're there, you don't realize you want to come back from it.
Right.
And depending upon the method you try, there's no coming back.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah,
So
pills,
true.
you could have your stomach pumped. Hanging yourself, not so much. You know, I mean, like, so
Right.
it's just...
I think that story also went viral, and it's him like speaking about it. You can find it.
Kevin Hines is his
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kevin
Hines.
Hines.
It's
Yeah, I
an
mean,
incredible
what an
story.
amazing thing that he turned his life, you know, into service and trying to help others, you know, steer away from suicide.
Which probably helps him with his
Right.
bipolar depression. That's the other thing, too. I have this quote that depressed people probably aren't going to like.
No.
But it's from a Tom Robbins book. Either of you familiar with Tom
Yeah.
Robbins?
Yes.
I love that guy. You know, he's from the South. He's from South Carolina, I think.
Yeah.
But he lives in Seattle. He's such a brilliant writer.
Yeah, he is.
But he wrote this about unhappiness, which is not necessarily depression. But I wonder sometimes if service, if getting out of yourself and helps. And he wrote this quote that I think is so great. When you're unhappy, you get to pay a lot of attention to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to take yourself oh so seriously. You're truly happy people, which is to say you're people who truly like themselves. They don't think about themselves very much. Your unhappy person resents it when you try to cheer him up because that means he has to stop dwelling on himself and start paying attention to the universe. Unhappiness is the ultimate form of self-indulgence.
It's true. I think about that, like how like depression is, I feel, which is a very selfish place to be sometimes. It's like just constantly thinking about myself. Be also kind of mean, like just mean to yourself.
It's mean to yourself, right?
Yeah, it's and I think that's through the therapy in conjunction with my medication. I've really learned to sit with my sadness and befriend my sadness, and it's through this Gestalt theory, which was really uncomfortable at first, where I had to talk to this pillow as part.
You had to talk to a pillow?
Yeah, and I was
about
like,
what?
Because you have to externalize yourself.
You are too
I'd be
fluffy like that.
No, I'd be like, it was a part of me, like explain what you're experiencing right now. And I'd be like, I'm just really sad, and I'm not sure, like my feelings are really hurt about these things. And then I'd have to switch positions, and I'd take the position of the pillow and talk to this person. And it was like, well, just, snap out of it. Stop feeling bad about yourself. And then I'd switch back and be like, well, that also hurts my feelings. So then it kind of like helped me to recognize this internal dialogue that I have.
Interesting. That's fascinating.
Well, it's even more fascinating. She's like, well, how old did you feel when you were speaking at that? Like when you were in this vulnerable spot? And I was like, I felt like I was like 5 years old.
Yeah.
And then it's connecting to things that like happened in my past of like being sent to my room for being too emotional and
Oh
being
my God.
too sad.
I swear to God, I've talked to so many. This is one of my favorite things to interview clients about, and I want to do a study one day about how many people were sent to their room.
Yeah.
And they can vividly tell me what it felt like. I cried so hard. I tried to get my parents' attention to come in the room and stop me. I know exactly what I played with. I
Wow.
can feel I can
Right
tell you
back
exactly how many hours I was in there. And then I asked them one critical question.
What?
Why were you sent to your room? I don't know. I'm like, what a great corrective experience that was for you. So you have no clue what you did and you don't remember it. But what you do remember is that your parents completely abandoned you and made you feel like shit for hours.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, it's so contraindicated for good child rearing. I'm sorry, but
That is crazy.
Yeah, they can all
that they
remember
don't
this
remember
terrible
why. That's so
experience.
funny when you're saying that. I know exactly why I got sent to my room.
Oh, really?
Oh, I know exactly why I got sent to my room. It was for basically flipping off my mother. Oh shit! And going, fuck you! I'm not doing that. Not doing it. It was
Right.
for complete non-compliance.
Right.
It was not for being too emotional. You were sent for your room for being too emotional.
yeah, I was told all my life that I was too sensitive, too emotional.
Oh,
and
that's not okay.
No, you know what that is? We don't want to see that feeling.
That's
Make it go
oppression.
away.
Yeah, and
that's oppression.
Well,
And
that's a
it's-
lot of why people don't talk about being depressed. We don't
Right.
want to be too much for you. So we'll mask it and
Exactly.
not be who we are, which is very disingenuous to who you are. So then you feel like it's not the depression that makes me not good enough. I'm not good enough, and therefore I'm not acceptable, and I'll just be over here.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It's
And
so
I'll just
true.
be over here. I'll be over here.
Yeah.
And I think also part of that plays into like generational and cultural differences.
Yeah.
Like my parents came from grew up in the 1950s from
Yeah.
the like traditional Catholic Ukrainian,
Background, yeah.
background where it's like you don't talk about your
Yeah.
feelings. You put on this, and I mean. And just the general stigma of like, okay, being sad or just different things, not talking me through being just inherently a sensitive person. But but through my own self journey, being able to harness that as my gift,
Right, it is.
but also my curse.
Right.
You know.
Well, yeah.
And do you
it's-
think you could even be in the field that you're in and not be a sensitive
Oh
person?
God, no.
No, you couldn't.
Yeah.
And I
Because I'd be like, I don't care.
Right.
You're eating the carrots.
Right.
No,
Right.
yeah.
That's it.
And I think that's also why being in San Francisco in school and studying political science also contributed to my depression, as well as not to get political, but like just and social, how it's placed on social media, that we're like bombarded with these like sad images.
Right.
You know, we're learning these sad things, and
Right.
it's like you feel hopeless.
Right.
Like you can't. You know what I mean? So
Change,
especially when you're so sensitive
ineffectual
to it and
yeah.
empathetic to these things that you're learning about. It's just like, oh my God, like.
Yeah.
All fucked, you know.
So I have a question. I have another question. So in my journey of learning who I am, right, from young, from being really screwed up and not knowing who I was, to I think I have a pretty good grasp of who I am. I'm pretty much the same person all day, every day with every person. So I think that means I kind of know who I am, because my behavior doesn't really alter much. I self-acceptance of your warts and all is such a gift and a freedom and a blessing. And that saying, you know, you don't do the world any good by shrinking.
Yep.
You serve the world by being yourself. We are all exactly as we should be. And we all have something to contribute. So as a person who looks outside of you and says, why are you like that? That is an oppression of love and of everybody living to their fullest potential. No matter who that oppressor is, even if it's your boss, you're a stranger who goes, why would you do that? Well, people make mistakes. I make mistakes too, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about speaking to who you are, not what you have done, right? Your behavior is a choice based on who you are, but sometimes you take a left turn and you hit a car and you don't mean to.
Right.
You know, that's not what I'm talking about. But I think that stupid saying, I said this on Bert's podcast, it's not stupid, but from the Bible, where you say, you know, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, is the key to what we're not doing right in society today. That is the key to turning everything around a bit, is to say, I would never treat you that way.
Yeah.
I would to be the pillow.
Yeah.
And to turn around and be the pillow.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you got to understand how the pillow, no one cares about how the other person feels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They only care about how it makes them feel.
So there's an exercise for that for depressed people. If you get them to write down a bunch of the negative self-statements that they have, right? You first start with, you know,
I'm ugly, I'm
their
fat,
name,
whatever.
right? You know, dear
Oh,
so
their
and so,
name.
you know, you're this, you're that, you're da 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 da, right? And you get them to write it all down. If you're trying to get somebody to understand what the depression is like, you get them to write it all down, and then you change the name to a friend.
Oh God, like it's gonna be
And
killed.
the person then has to read it. The depressed person then has to read it. And you would never,
What an amazing exercise.
never do that to somebody else.
That's
ever.
true.
Why would you do it to yourself?
That is an amazing
Yeah.
exercise,
Yeah.
Amy.
It's
You know, the Reiki guy that I worked with forever in my 20s, who was like a healer, who taught me so many life lessons like that.
Right.
He used to say to me when I would get into that negative self-talk, which I did a lot in my 20s, he would say, talk to yourself internally like you would talk to a 5-year-old.
Exactly. Or as a friend that
Just
needs,
a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
Right.
You would be gentle.
You'd be
you would
patient.
find levity. You would figure out how they could hear it. You would
Right.
simplify your thoughts
Right.
down to the base.
Yeah.
Just talk to yourself like you would talk to 5-year-old Leanne.
It's so true.
So much kindness and acceptance.
Right. And there's no kindness in depression.
no.
There's no, it
Ugly
doesn't sound
and
like
dark
it.
No.
and cold and
Mean.
isolative and mean and so
Hurtful.
unfortunately, and I mentioned intrusive thoughts for a second, unfortunately when people say like, well, why can't you just think differently or change your thinking and da da da, it's the desire to change is there. the battle, the constant battle against change is also there. So
constant battle against change.
Against the change. The messages that they got from youth of, you're too sensitive, you're too emotional, go correct yourself, go self-soothe in the other room so we don't have to deal with it. Like all of that is also ever present and ingrained. Mm-hmm. Right? That's what they were taught. Like the way you self-soothe is you go in your room and be quiet.
Or fall apart.
Isolate.
Or fall apart.
Right.
And
Isolate.
that's so true. And that is what I do. It's
Right.
so fascinating.
So you learned that that's how you were taught
to
self-soothe, but it's not the correct way of doing it. But then how do you teach yourself that what your parents did to you is not correct? Because that's your own experience.
Exactly.
Right?
That's your only experience.
Right. Exactly.
There's one roadmap for most people.
Right.
Very few people
until they
grow
go
up
to other
into-
people's houses a lot when they're younger, and they
Exactly.
go, "Wow, people don't scream at each other. Or people do scream at each other. Or people fight with their siblings, or they don't fight." I mean, any other external experience, it's important.
So
There's
true.
a great book called Daring Greatly. Have you read this book? Have you read this
I think you told me about it.
Oh, so good.
It's about being vulnerable, right? Is it by Brené Brown?
Brene Brown.
Oh, Brene Brown.
Yes.
It
You
is
did mention
about
that.
being vulnerable, but it's also, she breaks down the difference between shame and guilt.
Right.
And how you process that emotion as a child.
Yeah.
So one of the clear things she said in the book was that if your parent said, "You're a bad girl, go to your room because you're a bad girl."
Oh, yeah.
How did you react? Did you go, "Well, maybe I'm a bad girl"? Or did you go, "I'm not a bad girl. Why would you talk to me that way?"
Well, what child would react as I'm not a bad girl? The people
I did.
Oh, see, you're lucky. You're lucky. So you had a self-preservation.
I knew my mother
inside
was
you.
crazy.
Yeah,
I went, "You're crazy."
And a lot of people don't
Crazy.
have that instinct. What they have is, and in foster kids that I've treated, the parent could come back over and over and over again, and be a constant disappointment, and just literally crap on them. I mean, miss everything, miss all the appointments, do everything wrong, and that child will defend them to the hilt because it's the only parent they've got.
Well, yeah, I had another parent.
Right.
So that parent, I put all my eggs in that basket.
Right. And you're lucky you had that other parent.
Yeah, and
a
he
lot of
wasn't
times that
like
other
that.
parent will collude with the first one.
No, they were divorced.
There's a symbiotic kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had I had two
Right.
different parenting styles going on at the same time.
So you were taught, but you could have easily believed her.
I
and
could
not
have.
him.
And that's what I always say. If I had a sibling,
There's a resiliency there.
that sibling would have been shame,
Yep.
shame, shame, shame,
Yep.
shame, and
Yep.
would have been a disaster.
They would have been a whipping
But
post.
I just found it fascinating that she broke it down into that's how you internalized it.
Right.
Yeah.
You either my friend Sandy, I talked to my friend Sandy about this, who's a refugee, who's been through so much shit in her life, and she remembers that doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not crazy, you're the one that's crazy, as a small 7, 8, 9-year-old
Right,
kid.
right.
And she's one of the happiest, most resilient people I know.
Yeah.
She's an amazing human being.
That is unfortunately not the norm.
It is not the norm. But I wonder how you shift that patterning, that impression, because it really makes an impression, like a dent in
Right.
your soul,
Right.
from taking it
imprints.
as I'm the bad one, I'm shameful,
And that's the work in therapy.
And can I tell you, and when she said to me, "What do you want to do to that 5-year-old girl sitting in her room crying?" And I was like, and I started crying. I was like, I just want to give her a hug.
Yeah.
And she's like, give her a hug.
Right.
And it was such a healing experience for me.
It's
Was it?
reparenting.
Yeah,
You're
and-
literally responsible for reparenting yourself, which is, again, I'm going to ask the depressed person to do so much work. Why?
no, but it was such an enlightening.
Yeah.
So much was lifted off of me. I feel
Was
like,
it?
and I was able to learn to forgive. I mean, just make that feeling, that connection of being able to hug and forgive myself,
Right.
or nurture myself.
Yeah.
Transferred into other parts of my day-to-day thinking and thought process. You're right. It is reparenting.
It is. It's reparenting, but it's a huge shout out to, the work that you have to do can be so worth it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so worth it.
It is excruciating. It is harmful. It is painful.
Opening
It
up
is
things.
gut wrenching. Not always, but the payoff is huge.
It is
that's,
huge.
That's what I'll say. And a big shout out for Gestalt therapy, which a lot of people are like, "Oh, what is that?" It's amazingly powerful and can be very much like solution focused therapy, where there's instantaneous results and exercises like the letter, concrete exercises where it's not just talk therapy and
Right.
nothing happens, but
Right.
there is a constant rapport building and
Right.
Yeah.
It was so helpful.
So that's another helpful cognitive behavioral short-term solution focused Gestalt therapy can all be faster tracks to getting through depression.
I used to, when I was younger, when I was really learning and growing in my 20s, I would write letters to my mother that I would then burn.
That's exciting.
No one would ever read them, but I
Right.
was able to be so completely honest with my feelings that I could write it out and go, you're a fucking asshole and blah, 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 whatever I felt.
Yeah.
And I gave myself permission to not be
Therapeutic.
wrong about anything I wrote on that paper, because I'm burning it in 2 seconds. Nobody's going to see it.
Yep.
But it gets it out of your body in such a powerful way.
Yep.
And I wonder, that's
It's
also
cathartic.
It's cathartic.
You
yes.
were releasing the poison. You
Yes.
were basically like saying, I denounce your poisonous toxic behavior and it's out of here and I feel it. I'm not going to see. That's the other thing, is a lot of people don't validate what they're feeling.
That's so true.
And you were like, I
Right.
feel it.
Yeah.
I acknowledge it.
Yeah.
What is it? Stuart Smalley used to trace, embrace, and erase or something. I love Stuart Smalley. But it's that acknowledge it. You figure out where it's coming from. You see it. It's palpable. And then you go, great, thanks, don't need it anymore.
And you accept it
Right.
as this is part of my life experience.
Right.
And I'm okay that
Right.
this is part of my life experience.
And I'm going to survive it.
And I'm going to survive it. I was saying this to Halton yesterday. I had a very, my 20s were so transformative for lucky me.
Right.
But I had this moment where I blamed my mother for a lot of my problems. And I had this moment where I went, you're 20. You're an adult. And you don't get to do that anymore. So if from this day on, you're unhappy, that's on you.
Right.
That's not her fault. She may have fucked everything up. She may have been the worst mother on this planet. She may have done terrible things. But how you process and perceive that from today on is your responsibility. You
Right.
need to get some therapy. You need to let go of a bunch of stuff. You need to move on. Or you're going to stay
And
this
wallow.
person
Yep.
forever.
Yeah.
That's your choice.
Right.
You can take back to that thing of taking responsibility for, I feel these things and it's not my fault these things happen to me, but I'm responsible for how I feel about them now.
Right.
So, and some of my feelings are very justified. It's not that I should go, it's okay, you get a free pass for all those bad things. That's not what I mean.
Right.
It's that you take those bad things and place them where they need to be in your heart and soul and let go of them. Or
Right. There's a saying, don't regret the past or wish to shut the door on it. It happened. It's in the
Yeah.
past. It colors who you are today. Move forward. Don't feel shame about it.
Right.
Don't dwell in it.
Yeah.
Just
Right.
move forward and understand that it happened.
And I think, I've practiced a lot with meditation and even in therapy, we talked about this, was like being just observing my thoughts instead of becoming them. You know what I mean? That like taking a deep breath, even closing my eyes, so I can actually distance myself from my thoughts, so I can like just be an observer of
Like
them.
that happened.
Yeah.
and using humor is key in that too.
It's true.
It's key.
And like I'm listening to him, like, okay, I hear you, I hear
Right.
that,
Yeah.
okay, and like letting it pass.
Right.
You know, that you don't have to be every thought that passes through your mind.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and I think that coincides with like being able to take that responsibility, is also being able to accept. You know, I think for me, often I try to fight the feelings I have because I don't want to go into that dark place.
Right.
That like, no, I'm not sad. I'm happy. I'm happy.
Right.
I'm going to be all right. And it's like,
Which is not
no,
congruent with
it's
what's
no, and
going
it's like an
on. Yeah.
internal conflict, which is exhausting me. And to be able to befriend myself and just sit with my sadness as I would with a friend, with compassion, and be like, I hear you. You're sad. That is messed up. That happened. You know, and that's okay that you feel that way. You're allowed to be sad. It doesn't make you a shitty person. It makes you a human.
Right.
And part of it is also acknowledging just because you're sad right now doesn't mean that feeling's going to be here forever. Yeah.
And then being able to sit with it, it allows you to
It'll
heal
pass,
it.
yeah.
You know, instead of just kind of pushing it down, and then you're
Yeah.
like,
Right.
you know, go ahead
walk
and go
through
back
it.
years to understand what's all this
Right.
bottled up pain.
Yeah. It's
Right.
going through it. It's walking through the
through it.
feeling and feeling it and kind of taking it with your hand and forcing yourself to go through it, because if you don't, you're just gonna be behind it.
It's like pacing in front of a gate, right? Instead of just walking through this briar-covered gate,
Yep.
you go, well, once I'm through it, I'm through it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm done. I'm on the other side. But pacing in front of the gate
Yeah.
forever does you no good.
Right.
It just
Except
gets
it's
you,
safe. It's a beautiful analogy
It is safe.
because it's safe. You're in a safe place and it doesn't hurt right then. But to walk through the briar, you know, is going to hurt. Even though where you want to get on the other side is where you want to be.
Yeah.
So it's a great analogy.
True, it is. That is how it feels.
It is how it feels to know that you have to feel something. I know that when I was working with the Reiki guy, he told me one day, he said, you have more sadness than any person I have ever known, but you are the happiest girl every day.
That's so funny.
Until you feel that sadness, you're never going to really accept your happiness.
Right.
It's so true.
So I was like, okay, I was always I'm going to do that. Like, if you're saying this is what I need to do, I will be doing that.
Right.
I always have been very like, just give me the tool,
right,
and I will use the tool today.
Right.
So I was living in New York. I was living in Spanish Harlem, and the person above me was a composer who banged the piano to get his composition.
Yeah.
So I would hear him, gong, 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 for hours.
Oh, yeah.
So at some point, it would make me so sad because it was very dark,
right,
the music this guy was banging. I would go in my closet and close the door and just sob. So I was like, if I can hear him playing piano, he definitely can hear me sobbing.
Right.
So I'm going to go in the closet and sob. And I just sob for no reason. And I did it for a long time. I was in that apartment for 3 months. And I think I did it just about every day for 3 months.
Oh my God.
Did you
because I just wanted to get it out.
Yeah. Did you feel like it was a healing experience, or did you feel like more stuck?
I think I felt both.
Yeah.
I think I felt like I trusted him, and he was telling me, you need to cry.
Oh, funny.
And
I
I
love
think
that.
I trusted that.
Yeah.
So I just kept going back in the closet and crying. But no, I wasn't like remembering a specific memory.
It
I
was
was
just an allowance to be
Release.
cathartic.
an allowance to cry.
And this is a
Yeah.
perfect thing for Gestalt therapy. Everybody has a different Gestalt. The way they explain it is like, you can be in line for a museum, and the first person in line is focusing on the sign behind the little museum person that says like, this is $10 for admission. They only have $7, and they're freaking out. And the person behind them is focused on the sign for the bathroom. And they have to pee, and the one behind them has their kid tugging at their arm, and they're like, I'm gonna kill you. And everybody's in the same line at the same time, but they're having a completely different experience.
right.
Right. And, I lived below a very famous choreographer who was tapping above me, and it didn't make me cry at all.
I bet not.
And the only thing I did was give her dirty looks every time I saw her in the lobby.
Seriously?
Like, honestly, at 3 a.m, you had to do that,
Oh my gosh.
Didn't force me to feel any feeling.
Right? No, it was not cathartic, not healing, no processing.
Different Gestalt.
Yes,
Gestalt. It's
totally
very
different
funny.
Gestalt.
True.
So how do we wrap this up? What have we learned today? What is the message we want people to walk away with? That it's okay to be depressed?
Oh my God. Yeah,
Yes.
it's a chemical imbalance.
Yeah.
It's not by choice. No young, beautiful child wakes up and says, you know what I want to be when I grow up? I want to be depressed. It's not given, it's not something that you look for or you seek to be. It's handed to you.
Yeah.
And
it doesn't make you a bad person.
No, it can make you an empath. I mean, you're much more vulnerable and open and emotional and available to, and you can understand people a lot more because you can connect to them on a deeper level. And in many ways, it can be a great gift, but it's unfortunately also something that makes you very sensitive to pain. And, I think the lesson is for people to be extremely open-minded about it. And I think people get afraid of it. They don't want to say the wrong thing and trigger somebody but I think just having an open heart and an open mind,
Is the way to go.
yeah. And acceptance is the key.
Intention,
on so many
too.
levels. Yeah.
The intention to be,
Right,
to
Mom.
care,
It's true.
not to judge.
Right.
But to just care.
And people get very nervous about what to say. I think the best thing you could do is show an honest interest and ask questions.
That's
What
very
is it
true.
like for you? I don't understand depression. I can't pretend to understand. What is it like for you? Explain it to me.
Yeah.
If you feel comfortable explaining it to me.
Now,
That
as a
kind of-
depressed person, would that make you upset to say, I don't understand what you're talking about?
I think
Can you explain it?
It depends. Sometimes
intention.
Yeah.
If it's an earnest desire to understand and be
when
helpful.
You feel that, like when
Yeah.
you can feel that trust and safety that this person wants to truly, then it becomes. But sometimes you'd be like, I will share with you, but just sometimes people need the time to, I guess, I don't know,
to open up.
Yeah, or
Well,
just,
when somebody's being disingenuous.
it's so true
or
though,
like-
and I think that is such a valuable thing. And even this was like really, helpful for me that, you know, you invited me to have me here, to want to have meaningful dialogue about it, because I think that is genuinely where I feel is that we need to kind of have an honest dialogue nationally about it, to have access to resources more available, and to understand each other.
To understand, right? Because I truly don't think I've ever been depressed. I mean, situational depression, sure, my grandfather died. I was upset, but to me, that's very different than your experience or other people's experience of true depression.
Right.
And to really, you know, it's like me trying to figure out what it's like to be gay,
right,
or what it's like to be black.
Right.
How would I ever know what it's like to be black? I can't even make myself black. So I can't make myself chemically depressed. I think it's, the more people would be willing to go, there's no way I could possibly understand this.
Right.
But I would like to be able to understand it and empathize or sympathize, whichever that right word is.
It's true.
That was my intention anyway, because this is one piece of mental health that I don't know anything about.
Right.
That lucky for me, it is not in my family anywhere.
Yeah.
So thank you for being open and sharing. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Because clearly, if 4 other people said no, it must be really hard.
It is hard. It is hard. It is. But, you know, I'm grateful that I've had the experiences I've had to be able to recognize it within myself, and being able to also relate to other people. And if I can, you know, it made me a lot more aware too when other people are struggling. And then there are a lot of people that feel this way.
I think
and
so.
that they're not alone.
Yep.
And that,
and I think they're not diagnosed.
No.
Oh God, no.
So,
yeah.
To be able to share that, gives it purpose, and it helps me.
Good.
So,
well, thank you. Thank you, Amy, for your
yeah.
expertise. You're always so fun.
I'm happy to be out of work. Do you know what I mean? Like I send people away all the time. That the happiest part of my day is when I say goodbye to somebody. When they're like out the door and they've done well. And
oh, you mean like when they're finished their process?
Yeah.
I thought you meant, God, that hour's over.
God, no.
Thank God that hour's over.
I can honestly say I love every single client I've ever had. I'm so lucky that way. But I'm also so happy when they're like, bye, I guess I'll never see you. You know, I'm like, yay, that's the point.
I've done my job, right?
Yeah, right. And and my door is always open, and they come back if like I'm getting married and I don't know if this is the right person. Can I come see you for 2 or 3 sets? Yeah, of course. Like that's what therapy is intended for. It's not for, you know, if somebody needs it, great, but it's not for an unbroken bond that lasts forever that you can't get out of.
Right.
I'm still processing stuff. I need to come in and see you. No problem. But seeing somebody go out on their own and saying, I have my toolbox.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm ready to use it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Gotta go. Is like,
that's amazing. Yeah, I know. I've been with my same therapist for a long time. I look at her more as a mentor.
Right.
For me, she's a mentor because she's older than me. She's successful in her career. She's successfully, happily married.
Right.
She's a great mom. And I don't have that.
Right. So it's a role model.
For me, yes, she's my role model now more than she is.
Right.
When I first started with her, it was a healing, a real healing process. Now it seems to be more like, I'm thinking about starting a podcast.
Exactly.
What do you think about that?
Right.
You know, how do you think that'll affect my family, my life? She's more like that for me.
Yeah.
She's, I guess, more like a life coach, but is a therapist, you know?
Therapists have supervisors that we go back to for stuff like that. You know, because it can be extremely depressing to hear everybody else's depression.
Right.
You know,
decompress.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So we go and kind of check in and say like, what about this and what about that, and like, how is that affecting you? It's interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting job. I could never do it.
But what
if somebody sat on that couch every day and had the same shit? I'd be like, "Are you fucking kidding me? Shit or get off the pot."
Well, it's vicarious traumatization, isn't it? It's the name for
vicarious traumatization.
The trauma you receive from hearing. I mean, you know, it's not. I don't just get people who are depressed. I get people who have been through some serious stuff. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure.
You know. Police, like, you know, very dark stuff.
Yeah.
So vets, you know.
Right.
And things that I couldn't purport to understand because I haven't been in that situation. So the more honest I am about not understanding that situation, the more detail they feel free to give me, which takes me down with them.
Right.
You know, which is how it's supposed to be,
Right.
because they need someone to walk down with them
Sure.
to look at it and then come back up again, you know, but in doing so, it can be very upsetting.
Of course.
Yeah. So it's taking care of yourself. It's the whole thing is learning how to take care of yourself, whether you're a helper or a helpee. It's all about learning how to take care of yourself. And the crisis line hopefully is flashing.
I'll put it on my website.
Yeah.
I'll definitely put it up on my
It's
website
so
and
important.
maybe in our details to this episode, because that is important to have somebody to talk to. I could never do what you do. I swear to God. I don't think I'd take it home with me. I'd go like, that's a load of shit. Why is that happening? How do we fix that? Let's just fix it.
Right.
Turn the boat around.
Yeah.
I'm too pragmatic.
Some people like that. Some people are into
Dr.
that.
Phil, right?
Yeah.
I could never be
get
Dr.
me
Phil.
started on Dr. Phil.
My therapist
and his
hates Dr.
license
Phil.
status and Texas. We won't go there.
His what?
No, we'll do that off the air.
Okay, off the air. Okay. Well, thank you guys. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so
You're
much.
so welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.